Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Expert Discussion Session. Today, we are very much fortunate to have a Chief Executive Officer of Upgrade Enterprise, Srikanth Iyengar, with us. Srikanth, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you, Sujay. Thank you, Sid. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me on the show.
Now, pleasure is all ours. So, Srikanth, if you may kick off by introducing yourself, your role, and how do you seeing the world evolving with all the buzz around AI, and also the importance, the data, or even lack of importance in the eyes of the executives that you interact with. So, if you can take us through your introduction and just kick it off.
Sure, sure. I think, look, first of all, in terms of my introduction, I have the privilege of leading Upgrad Enterprise. For those of you who don't know Upgrad, we are a Mumbai headquartered global skilling company. We skill learners, individuals, employees of enterprises, and we also partner with universities on helping people build skills as they go through their careers, all the way from entry level to very senior people. We focus on areas like tech, data, AI, leadership, and soft skills, and in certain specific domains, domain skills as well. In terms of my past background, spent a lot of time in the tech services space, Infosys, Capgemini, Sujay, you and I have worked a
Yeah.
bit together in the past, so good to see you again. And worked across geographies. Worked in Asia, North America, worked and lived rather in Asia, North America, and now Europe. So that's me in a nutshell. Look, going to your question about data, I think the question is moot because I think any leadership team or any CEO who says that data is not important, frankly, I think they risk becoming a piece of history themselves in that sense. Because let me take our business, right. Like I said, we've skilled as Upgrad Enterprise. Upgrad, we've skilled about 12 to 13 million people over the last 10 years. So just to give you a sense of scale. And a lot of these people spend a significant part of their income investing in skilling, right? And companies spend a lot of money on skilling. And the thing about skilling is demonstrating outcome. If you just say, have you completed a course? Yeah, you completed a course, but have you really learned? You probably can't quantify that unless you have data, right? And that's where for us data is super super critical, in the sense that completion is one aspect. How people have done through their exercises is another aspect. The labs that we do, have they spent enough time on the content is the third aspect. How much do they interact in projects across groups is the fourth aspect, right? How do they do on assessments as a fifth aspect. Now all of these are aspects of learning that become important, and for all of us who've gone through school and a university course, we know that this is critical. That's what we've taken to our learning pedagogies as well. So answering your question in short, data is very very critical. Are we a data enterprise? I'd say we're a skilling company. Could we exist without data? The answer is absolutely not. So yeah.
Very well said, Shrikant. I mean, I wanted to take that to a next level because I mean, I've actually used Upgrade in the past myself as well. I found the user experience, by the way, really intuitive.
Thank you
So that
for
was
that.
one of the reasons I was actually hooked on a few years ago to Upgrade. But you mentioned about data, but I think there's two aspects around data, right? So data that you collect, perhaps of people who are using the platform, some of the metrics you mentioned, but I'm sure there's also data that your enterprises are collecting. Maybe you are discussing with other, data leaders or even CEOs for sure around how they are managing all this in a broader context in their enterprises. So please share that perspective as well. So both from
Sure,
maybe
sure.
double clicking a bit on the Upgrade part as well as the your customers part of the
Yeah,
data.
yeah, yeah. So look, that's true. I mean, we all know that we're in the middle or in this epicenter of what's called an AI revolution or an AI inflection point, as you call it. And there wouldn't be AI without data because any model, whether it's a language model or any other model, needs to be enriched with the data. And that's what we hear across the board. So we do all the basic things with our clients. We skill them on platforms, so whether it be a Snowflake, a Databricks, etc. By the way, we started as a data skilling company 10 years ago, so we're very happy with that. But I think what's more critical is whenever I talk to our clients, and this is CXOs of companies, I think they're realizing that the AI world is evolving very, very fast. Okay, and as you can see, there's a shift from just using an LLM to actually working use cases or agentic plays within your sort of firewall. And in that sense, the data that you already have and how you use it becomes super, super critical. So I know in your book, you talk about data as the fourth pillar, the four pillars are process, technology, people, data. And we work very much at the people layer, but we work very much at the data layer as well in terms of helping people scale. So both layers important. I'll take a few examples, right? I'll take a few examples. You take, we work a lot with financial services firms, for example, and in
Right.
financial services, often, you're trying to gain that slight edge if you're a trading company, and that often comes from data, studying reams and reams of data. AI makes it that much easier, and people believe that yes, you can just deploy an agent and an agent will do the job that a, let's say, a trader could do in the past. No, it's not that simple, right? There's a lot of complex data that you need to use. I'll take another use case of unstructured data. Interestingly, and you'll find this surprising. I was talking to this CXO of a mining company, right, in that sense. And we all think mining is an old, sort of not so attractive business, but actually it is probably one of the most innovative businesses that you need, because you're in a business where the cost of downtime is significant. It's also a business where environmental friendliness is important. You're working in fairly remote communities, and the cost of failure is very, very high. All of these things come into play, and it's critical, because if you did not have lithium, you wouldn't have EV batteries. If you did not have silicon, you wouldn't have chips, you wouldn't have the AI revolution. So that's important. But the point I'm trying to make is, in that industry, what the CXO was telling me was, yes, we've got data. We've got geospatial data, which talks about where we can drill, dig, all of that stuff. But we also look at data on our operations. And I said, give me an example. So he said, for example, they record the sound of conveyor belts that carry ore. And they just keep that, because sometimes when you do a, like what you'd call a regular data set, and you see some deviations of the sound, and the AI catches it, that tells you that there's probably going to be a breakage on that conveyor belt. And so you can do preventive maintenance on the back of that data, which you could not have otherwise, which means you cut your downtime to, let's say, half an hour, as opposed to, let's say, half a day. And that can make a
Right.
difference of $5 million to the bottom line. So just giving you a simple use case. Yeah, yeah.
That's a great example. Actually, you reminded me of the case study we have in the book by Audi, and they've mentioned a very similar example. The CDO of Audi, Rudiger, he mentioned that for each and every weld they do in the shop floor, it's not just that they are measuring the amount of welds and the way it's done, etc. There's of course a big quality process part to it, but they're also even capturing each and every temperature. When you're starting to weld these, because if there's slight deviations in temperatures, that's a data point that can result later in abnormality later in the shop floor, right? So if they capture that data on time, they could prevent a lot of rework that needs to be done later down in the shop floor. So it's reminded me of the same example, kind of in a different situation.
Yeah.
So I think very valid point and very good examples here. So however, Srikanth, from your vantage point of being the CEO, and I'm assuming you're interacting with your peers in your customers base, and that's what Sid and I have observed. The operations team is very much knowledgeable about data, then they're working, but then they are struggling to communicate the value bottoms up. But if we put the focus and onus on the top, they, as you said, they realize data is critical for their business. There is no AI production, AI without value data. But then they do not take the accountability for data. When it comes to a data topic, then they just delegate it downwards, thinking that it's a IT topic, technical topic, I'm not knowledgeable. But if data is critical for their business or even for an existence, if I may say so, they must be involved, they must take on the accountability, they must provide their sponsorship and stay in the game rather than watching from the sidelines. So love to hear your perspective. How do you see whatever I'm saying is still correct, or do you see there's a change happening within the mindsets of these boards and the CXOs?
No, there definitely is a change, and I think change doesn't happen overnight. It's not a
Exactly.
switch that goes off; it's gradual. But one thing I will say is that the pace of change has accelerated significantly. Right, going back to physics in school, while the velocity might have increased, the acceleration is far higher. So that's pretty much what's happening. So I'll give you a few things. Right, you're right. If you went back 15 years ago, most companies said, yes, we need data. The CIO will take care of it. Right, But I think today companies, and this has been for the last 5 years, and AI has only accelerated, they realize that data is a huge source of competitive advantage. Because if you've been in a certain business longer, or if you have a larger customer base or a client base, or you process transactions faster than a potential competitor, that becomes your moat, your source of competitive advantage. And so once leadership teams see it that way, suddenly it becomes a core part of the business. I mean, and I know that in the last few years, companies have acquired other companies with the express purpose of having access to their data models. And the actual business model is probably secondary in some cases. But that realization in enterprise is a lot wider. And I'll give you some indications of that. Earlier, someone called a CDO would sit in the IT organization. Today, often a CDO sits as part of the global leadership team. And then you don't just have a CDO, you have a CDAO. That's the new title, if you call it that, a Chief Data Analytics Officer. You have some version of that. But the whole point is that that person, that role becomes important. Also, I think what becomes important is how much these people are external facing, right? Often this was a very internal facing role, but often I can see centers of excellence, innovation, which is not just buried somewhere, but they're actively a part of the ecosystem. They're talking to people upstream and downstream. They're talking to new age companies. They're talking to experts like yourselves to understand how else they can monetize this. And to me, these are all indications of the fact that this is front and center. I'll actually, again take an example. One of the banks that we work with is one of the biggest banks in the UK, and not the biggest, one of the biggest in that sense. So the CEO of one of their divisions was telling me that, look, at the end of the day, we may be a bank, we handle money, but essentially we're an information company. And I try to understand why. And this is a conversation a couple of years ago, but it's still as relevant. And he said that we handle X percent of the UK's transactions. People get paid, comes into their savings account, they spend it, they pay their mortgage, they pay all that stuff, they spend it on credit cards, that flows into consumer enterprises, that flows into. He says, but if I follow the money, to use a phrase, I actually know how the economy is working. And that's my biggest source of competitive advantage, because somebody else may be able to raise deposits, but this is how I'm able to predict to my enterprises as to how I can add value to them when they're investing. I thought that was a fascinating perspective, that we're an information business who happens to deal with money.
Yeah, very well said. I think if every enterprise looks at how data can be weaved into the business model, perhaps, there could be new business streams or revenue streams that could be generated either directly using data monetization, or as you said with the bank example, it could just fuel, new value-added services, maybe even to the customers of that enterprise, right? I want to go a bit deeper, Srikanth, into the people aspect of this, though, because you mentioned in the beginning, Upgrad is primarily also a people kind of a service, right? I wanted to look at that in two lenses and get your perspective on that. One, in the context of, upskilling. You said data, for example, data analytics on Snowflake, Databricks, etc., is one of your core, and that was one of the skills I actually acquired from Upgrad. But I wanted to explain how more important in the day and age today is to have the people with the right skills to really harness that data pillar that we're talking about. And the other perspective is, how can data give back to the people pillar? And you mentioned a few examples, but there could be a lot more that you might be seeing, which we want to delve in a bit. How can a day in a life of a person at any kind of enterprise be useful with the data pillar? So I want to
Yeah,
get your
yeah,
perspectives on
yeah,
this.
yeah. So look, let me take the first one first, and thank you, by the way, for learning with Upgrad. I hope you had a good experience. But coming back, look, uh, people, we are in the people business. We help people realize their dreams, upskill themselves. The key thing about learning, though, is people want to spend the money, but it's a tough decision because it's not cheap for quality learning. Now, if you're going to a university, that's a centuries old model. People know that I get a degree at the end of it, they do it. But when you've got to invest with someone like us, there's always this thing: what do I get at the end of it? Right, in that sense. And so for us, helping the learner realize that they're actually making progress is very, very important, because it's not just about justifying the money they pay us, it's of helping them build confidence that they're getting better at something even before they get to the end result, right? In that sense. I'll take a classic example of a software developer. We do a lot of training on various coding languages for software developers. And one of the biggest things that, and you guys are technologists, code quality and productivity is a key debate in this thing. How quickly do you generate code? What is the quality of code? Being able to work with lab partners who can tell our learners that is super critical, very important. So the person does 10 exercises, they feel like, okay, I did better on 5. Okay, I have become better at my work. And that's critical for them to take back because there is the unsaid confidence that they build as well. That's one part. The other part is how do they justify their value within their organization? So when people learn with us, they typically learn for three perspectives. About 1 in 5 people learns with us because they just want to learn. But 1 in 2 people learn with us because they want a new job. And 33%, 1 in 3 people work with us, learn with us because they want promotions internally within the organization. So if you want a new job or you want a promotion, all right, and we all have aspirations, we have a right to do that. You need to demonstrate to a potential new employer or saying that you're better at something, and that's where the data really comes into play, right? I mean, through the process. Are you better at this part of the process? Are you better at this technology? Are you better at architecture? Are you also better at problem solving? All of those things come into play in that sense. The other thing I'd say, coming to, does data enable the people and do people enable the data? I think it sort of works both ways, if you call it that. I think let's take a few non-tech roles. I'll take a few non-tech roles, right? And for example, we do a lot of training in what you'd call sales and service. We train salespeople in retail organizations. Think of a Reliance Retail, or we train automobile. You talked about Audi. We actually train some of the German car makers, their dealer workforces in India on selling. Now, the end point of a sale is a car gets sold or not, or let's say the retail store a sale is made or not. But a lot of steps go into it. Do you approach the client the right way when the customer walks in? Do you pause too much? Or do you answer questions quickly? Are you very factual? And all of this now, you can just tell personally, you're not trying hard enough. That's not good feedback. When you're teaching someone how to sell better, it's a very involved skill. If you can record that, or you can take other data points through the process when you simulate it and give very constructive feedback back to the learner that, look, maybe if the customer asks a question, you need to be very specific on your answer. These are 3 things you say. That's a piece of data for them. Or if, let's say, a customer asks a specific question about the product, you need to know your product. If you don't, you go back and learn. Like, you might be a petrol head and you might say, what's the RPM at this speed? I'm not saying every salesperson needs to know that. Someone else says, are the seats leather? What are the other options? You need the ability for a salesperson to answer these questions quickly, because that often makes the difference between selling and not selling. So hopefully that brings it live for you. That's the level of detail and that's the data that we need to get into.
Yeah, I think that's very critical. Nice examples that you said. But and Shrikant, again, if we can elevate the discussions at that level, at an operational level, at an individual contributor level, data do impact business, right, significantly. But then again, coming back to your discussions with the boards and the CEOs, are they having that realization so that
Yeah,
they don't see
yeah,
data as a cost
yeah,
center? Because many
yeah.
customers that we talk to when we talk about a data solution, oh, my budgets are cut down, I can't hire people, I can't grow because I'm seen as a cost center and the value realization is not there. And another challenge is that boards and CEOs are then asking the data teams, okay, what's your value? But you don't ask your people team what's the value of the people. It's kind of ingrained of doing business. So that's one realization we want to try to bring to the book, through our book, of the message that when you see the structural pillar, it's part of your business and the foundation. You may not be seeing the value so separately because it is so much ingrained in your business. So how are that's our goal and objective, and how are you seeing in the industry about?
No, true, true. So I think, look, my read is this, right? I think boards and CXOs, and I won't generalize, there are many who are very forward thinking. They intuitively understand the value of data. There's no
Yeah.
question. But I think there is a bit of education in your book. I think will go a long way, hopefully, in that process. There's a bit of education to be done on how do you make the tangible business value live? So let's step back. Right? Typically, the issues that a board or a CXO is dealing with is my business able to generate sustainable, profitable, competitive advantage? Because that's the
Yeah.
whole premise of a business, right? Now, each of those words matters. Is it
Yeah.
profitable? That's critical. That's here and now. Is it sustainable? That's probably the biggest question on the planet today because
Yeah.
businesses are getting disrupted. Is it competitive? And is it an advantage? Each of these words can mean very, very different things. Now, often some boards, and there are statistics by McKinsey's and BCG's of the world that at least 40% of boards today think that their current business model won't last for 5 or 10 years. So
Yeah.
they're looking for, let's say, new sources of competitive advantage. When you look for that, often you look for adjacencies, you look at what the competition is doing. But it's also important to understand your business in totality and find out if there's a part of your business that you've not valued, that you've not exercised, that you've not used. I think that is super, super critical in that sense. And that's where data plays a key role. So, in my mind, looking at capturing of data and sorting and cleansing of data, yeah, that may be the cost angle. But looking at how do you extract value from it, I think that is a board decision, a discussion, a CEO discussion. And I think that is as important as information security. That is as important as reputational risk. That is as important as auditory risk, etc. That boards need to look at. Some boards do, and that's why one trend you'll see is that when you have boards that have one or two people who bring a digital mindset, you see more debate around that. When you've got boards that are predominantly constituted by people who happen to come from that particular industry, you tend to see a little less of that. So I would say that these are lead indicators. So I wouldn't say all the boards we deal with or the clients we deal with are there already. The realization is there. But I'd probably say 1 and 3 is ahead of the curve, which means 2 and 3 are not. So it's a huge opportunity in my view.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a journey, and that's why in the book we talk about a maturity journey as well. And looking at not only the supply, like you said, cleansing operations and data operations to supply data, but also the demand of data. And in the
Yes.
book, we have focused significantly of how these chief data officers must be focusing on demand and help the board and the CEO realize it and quantify it. Hey, this is so much demand potential. So we have bought in matrix like the total addressable value and expected addressable value and realized value. So very nice. And maybe on a lighter note, if I may say so, this might be some upgrade lessons for the boards and the CEOs that you could provide to help them visualize the
I mean,
value.
look, I'll be shameless and say we could work with people like you to skill them, but putting that aside, I think the debate itself is important. I think
Yeah,
that's critical. I mean,
yeah,
obviously, today every boardroom is talking about AI because they don't have a choice. All I'd say to them is that if you look at AI, yes, you've got a language model, you'll have a GPU. NVIDIA is the most valuable company in the world, but then you've got data and then you've got the right skills. So I think realizing that data is an integral part of any AI revolution that you do is super, super critical. That would be the one piece of advice. And the other thing I'd say to boards is it's very easy to say that we'll get people from the outside, young people who are Gen Z, who are AI native. But there is significant value in context, experience. That's where AI models are going to go. And even today, a lot of that context lies in people's heads because you can't capture every piece of data, right? I mean, I'm a sports fan, as I'm sure you guys are. We all love how Virat Kohli plays his cover drive, but none of us can replicate it, although we see it 1,000 times. So that experience, that context is important. So I'd say that it's not an either or decision. There's a lot of priceless information with your people that you can capture, that you can use. And with AI and cloud, the costs of capturing that and you leveraging that become very less. That would be my 2 cents. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing, Srikanth. I mean, you are actually stealing a lot of words from our mouth. Just this weekend, I put a post in LinkedIn about context beyond just the prompt context that you have. Your enterprise context, as you mentioned about your people, your operations, and your data, technology, etc. That is kind of going to be, I think, a secret sauce. I mean, for enterprise. So, I mean, this was an amazing discussion, Srikanth. And again, just to reiterate, we are so happy that a CEO like yourself is also uh, emphasizing the need for having data as the fourth pillar and also some of the aspects we have talked on in the book have been actually touched on by you. So really, really happy to hear. So just to conclude, any final thoughts you have for our viewers? How could they perhaps also get to know more about Upgrad? How could they reach you if they have more questions? Would love to hear.
I mean, look, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. We're a very flat business. You want to reach me? I'm on LinkedIn. You search Srikanth Iyengar. I'm glad you'll find me. Please reach out. Comments, feedback are welcome. But also in terms of learning about Upgrad, you can go to upgrad.com or upgrad-enterprise.com. Both are sort of, they learn more about us, the clients, the work we do. So if you want to collaborate with us, you want to join us, you want to leverage us as a partner, very welcome. And I think this is an ecosystem play for all of us. So quite very excited about the opportunities that lie ahead. And good luck to both of you. I mean, I'm sure your book is going to be a bestseller, but more than, again, the data of sales volumes, I think the data of mindset shifts is what you're going to measure. So I
Exactly.
wish you all the best with that.
Exactly. I
Very well
think
said.
that's our whole objective of writing the book, to get the message out, challenge the status quo, and get the conversations going. The book is just a tool in that process, right? Our biggest happiness is when we see boards and CEOs totally realizing that data is core to our business. We can't succeed or even exist without leveraging data as a strategic asset. So thanks, Srikanth, for today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.